Hey guys, welcome back to Let's Be Bold, and I'm super excited about today's episode. Now, by the time this actually airs, it's going to be March 1st, which technically is no longer Black History Month, but Black History is every day. So, for this episode, I am going to spend some time showing you some really phenomenal Black writers, Black women writers specifically. March is Women's History Month. I haven't necessarily read all of these. I do own all of them. They're on my list of things to read. And I want to talk about Black women authors, partially because I hope to be on this list one day of phenomenal writers who've published books. And I also want to talk about this because I feel like, from what I remember from high school, a lot of the readings, I don't think any of them featured very many people of color, if any, and I really don't remember any Black women specifically. The Black writers that I read growing up were books that my mom gave me. I remember when she gave me a copy of The Bluest Eye to read by Toni Morrison. So this is some books that I have learned about and have gotten a hold of that feature Black women writers, and I'm excited to share them with you today. So, first book, I actually got this pretty recently. It is called Ties That Tether. This book specifically is about a Nigerian woman, and her family would prefer her to date Nigerian men. And she's been set up by her mom several times and they haven't worked out, and she meets a white man that she is interested in. And so this gets into interracial relationships and family dynamics and all that comes with that. The next one is called Well-Read Black Girl. I read this a couple of years ago now, and I love this book for a couple of reasons. One, it is an anthology, which means that multiple writers have contributed to this book. And what's cool about it is the writers who are featured in here talk about other Black writers that influence them into writing, which is really cool. And in the back of the book, this is great. It has names of books written by Black authors, which I think is really cool. And yeah, so you should definitely pick this up if you're interested in expanding your knowledge of Black writers. This one I read last month. It is called Blackout, and let me tell you, I zipped through this in like 3 days. I'm talking like sitting on the couch and it would get dark and I wasn't paying attention. I'd be like, okay, let me click some lights on, because I just remember my dad fussing at me when I was sitting on the couch reading a book and it would get dark and I wouldn't pay attention, and he'd be like, why are you reading in the dark? So clicked some lights on, read Blackout. Takes place in New York, Brooklyn specifically. And obviously there's a blackout that happens. And the cool thing about this book is multiple authors also contributed to it, and it has multiple points of view from things that are going on in different people's lives, mostly the lives of teenagers and young adults. And I, one, am still a young adult, and two, work with a lot of young adults and teenagers, and so it just was a really nice read for me. I really enjoyed it. This next book I have not read yet, but I was really excited to see it, and I had to buy it immediately. This book is called You Are Your Best Thing, and it's written by Tarana Burke and Brene Brown, which, if you guys may remember, Tarana Burke started the Me Too movement, and Brene Brown is a shame researcher, and I read a lot of her books for my field and also because of my own enjoyment. So this book is also an anthology. It has multiple writers who specifically talk about working through vulnerability, shame, resilience, and the Black experience. And in media, a lot of times we see or have seen a lot of movies about Black pain, Black trauma, etc. And this book works through some of those things on a deeper level versus like, okay, this is the history of what happened to Black people as a whole, and this is how people have healed and grown so that we don't repeat generational trauma and we can pass along healing and health. And so I'm really excited to get into that. This next book is a memoir by Lima Bowie. She is Liberian, and she talks about her experiences in the Liberian Civil War and what she has learned about war. She is an activist who works with, specifically working with child soldiers, people who are put in those positions because of civil wars. Specifically in this book, she talks about how sisterhood, prayer, and sex changed a nation at war. I have not gotten into this yet, and I am very excited to get into it as well. I love stories about the influence that women have on society and politics and culture and the world. And I sometimes feel like that there isn't a lot of influence that maybe I have specifically, which I know isn't necessarily true. So for me, I enjoy reading books about how you can make change. This book I got for Christmas, and so I have not read it yet. It is called Homegoing, and the setting I know takes place in Ghana in the 18th century, and it talks about two different women who ended up in two very different situations. One woman who married an Englishman and had a life of comfort, and another woman who was captured in a village raid and imprisoned in the same castle that the former woman that I mentioned lives in. So I'm super pumped to read about this. It's got some great reviews. So again, this one's called Homegoing. Now, there has been a lot of talk in the media recently about fantasy and Black people in fantasy specifically, and how there aren't too many spaces where Black people are portrayed in fantasy worlds. So I think that there needs to be more of that. Obviously, representation matters. And I also know that sometimes there is maybe a negative outlook on Black folks who are interested in fantasy and like geeky and nerdy stuff, things like that. And growing up, it feels like that was a really small population of Black people who were interested in those things. And as an adult, it's so cool because it's like, wow, there's actually other people who like geeking out about these things too. Twitter has been especially helpful for that. I remember when The Last Airbender was released on Netflix, and my Twitter feed was full of Black folks who were super pumped about it being able to be accessed on Netflix and doing a rewatch. And I was like, where were you guys when I was in middle school and high school? Because it was just me and my sisters who loved and enjoyed this show, and then some people at my school who were white, which is fine, but like I did not know any other Black people who were interested in The Last Airbender, and I tell everyone about it. And so anyway, that's been really cool for me to experience, having an increase in community online and TikTok and Book Talk, etc., of Black folks who are interested in fantasy world. So one of my favorites in adulthood is called Children of Blood and Bone. This is a trilogy, and you best believe that I also have the sequel. We'll get there. The third book is set to be released in 2023. And so Still got some time to wait for that comes out. However, I have heard that there is movie rights for this coming out, so I'm super pumped about this. So this book follows a girl, and she lives in this fantasy world of Orisha, and there is no magic in this world. All the magic have been lost. The people who currently rule somehow got rid of the magic, suppressed the magic, and killed anyone who had access to the magic, had magical gifts, etc. And so she is coming up, and she ultimately is going after, she's looking for the magic. Her mom had it, her mom was killed, and so she is a very outspoken advocate, and is like, we are going to take and find and restore what was taken from us, and be proud of our heritage. And so it's really cool. I loved reading this. Like I said, I also have the sequel, Children of Virtue and Vengeance, which, the main character, she becomes a leader in this space, and she continues to fight for her people and her heritage and taking back what was lost. And so I highly recommend this. I also love the cover art for this, because she's just really beautiful, and she's also dark-skinned, which you don't see a ton of in fantasy spaces, specifically darker-skinned people. So those are some of the books by Black writers that I wanted to share, and through the lens of Black history, and just to encourage people to look into these spaces. And if you are an aspiring writer like me, there are writers in the world who look like you. And I also want to identify that reading for fun is something that can be really helpful to our mental health. And there is a term in the mental health world that people engage in something called dissociation, to just try to distance themselves from what is going on in their day-to-day life. Now, I'm not encouraging disassociation by any means. I can do a different video about grounding techniques and how we connect to our bodies during times where we realize that we are disassociating and really disconnected from what's going on in the moment. However, what I am saying is finding time to spend time in another world, whether that's through literature, whether that's through fantasy TV, whether that's through video games, can be really good for mental health, because we are allowing our imagination to take space, and our creative worlds to take space and take a break from the reality and the hard things that we face every day. And when we do that, it's like, I can reorient. I've taken a break. I've calmed down. I've got maybe a little bit more of a level head than I did when I first got home from work, for example. So I just want to encourage you guys to engage in those space. And so my challenge for you this week is to do something that you enjoy, that feels like a break from your world, whether it's reading Children of Blood and Bone or whether that is spending time capturing Pokemon in a video game. So until next week, thanks for watching.